for the larger enterprises, the challenge really is to address the business need and re-engineer before you even start looking at adoption of these new technologies. Anyone want to comment on that before we move on?
I'll comment on that. I mean, I do a lot in that space, and that's 100% correct. Now, I don't think it necessarily applies only to big companies. Big companies just have a lot more complexity on it. Systems work based on good processes and good data. All right. And one of the challenges of relying on more advanced systems is a lot more data that you need in those systems for them to answer all those questions that you may not even have. Or the data is really dirty or it's not clean, and that's extrapolated in a large organization. So I think the big mistake, and you got to it, that a lot of people make is, yes, they want to take their old system, their old processes, and just apply it and automate it, right? That dog usually doesn't hunt. That doesn't get very far. You're still going to have a mess and you customize. So you need to think through, and I think it's also important that you don't just do everything that everybody else does, because then you really could lose competitive advantage. So what I see happening more effectively is, what are the stuff that's just very standard, accounts payable, invoice processing, pretty standard. It's not going to give me a competitive advantage. Take what the system provides. Change your process. Do it their way. That's going to be 80% of the processes out there. Now, there's going to be a 20% that's really the secret sauce to your business, or maybe it's how you do demand planning. Maybe it's certain things that you do, where in those cases, you still may want to even do custom development. One of the things we've seen is much more of a boom in custom development, but not around very standard processes, but around the unique stuff that makes you who you are, right? Maybe it's certain algorithms, maybe it's certain ways you look at consumers. And that's where you spend and customize, but the stuff that's generic, that doesn't really make you any difference commercially, from a commercial perspective. And I think that's the key question a lot of people don't ask themselves. What makes me, give me commercial differentiation, commercial value? Everything else, I can standardize. And that tries to the processes, and people don't think of it that way. They think of it as, this is the way we've always done it, and we want to do it again.
Right.
I can provide maybe a little bit of a proof point. So we're 6 months into our SAP S4 HANA implementation. I did exactly what Raul suggested. When we started the project, one of my audit committee members was the CIO at Cardinal Health. They did 3 ERP implementations across their company, spending $250 million in implementation costs. So when I told her we were going to do it in 12 months and we're going to spend $10 million, she absolutely laughed at me and said we were crazy. And what we did, and right now we're on track. It's on track to be done in 12 months. And we're a $3 or $4 billion in billings company with 40 countries and a lot of complexity. We are basically customizing our interface with Zuora, which is our RevRec and revenue capture, sales tool, which is very, we have very complicated 606 unique aspects that we have to do a lot of customization. That is 80% of the project. 20% is we're taking everything else and we're just doing what they call fit to standard, or I am not going to modify SAP around procurement, around AP, around any of that other stuff, because as much as people don't want to change the process, they actually should. And the way they did it around NetSuite is not best in class anyways. And so I said, great, guess what? Everyone gets to learn this new system and everyone can do it, and we're going to do it. And so far it's working great. And we'll initially we'll save halfway through. So, but we've already gone through a number of hurdles, and we'll probably save, 3 or 4x on consulting costs. We'll create some pain, but we will have a better outcome because we're doing exactly what Raul said, which is just focus on what's unique about your business, and then don't let the people complaining about change drive the rest of the process. Otherwise, it'll cost you too much money, and the consultants will certainly stay and do the work and charge you accordingly. But anyways.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah. So if we switch gears and move on towards the forecasting, planning, and analysis, and I think that need has been heightened again because of the on-demand type forecasting need that we see today. In this uncertain, complex world that we're living in, businesses are having to forecast on demand. How do we start to move towards an environment where we can start to talk about those value creating activities? And I was with the CFO of Microsoft a couple of months ago, they've automated their forecasting process. And what he said to me was, Ash, there's no value created in saying, here's your forecast. It's what you do with that forecast then is what is going to create the value, right? So we want to get to that stage where we are able to provide forecasting on demand, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you get there? What are the steps? 60% of the audience are saying we need help in our planning forecasting process. How do we get there?
There's so many dimensions of that. You know, there's the walk before you run, and then there's the, you know, sort of because I think I've got some sort of table stakes thoughts and curious what the panel thinks about it. But then, you know, which includes things like, you know, get out of Excel, you know, get into collaborative tools. Adaptive Insights is great. I've brought that into a few companies. Host Analytics is great. You guys have all seen these tools. Really, really great ways to collaborate. But it's only as good as the data. And so you've got to get the data right. And so if you think about, like, if you have the right data and you really understand the unit economics of your business, you can build, you know, regressions, which goes a little bit to the talent conversation we'll have in a minute. But you can really get the data to help inform what might be predicted. But right, the real value is, how do you move that, right? If history says this is what the future is going to be, it really takes kind of some thoughtful analytical humans around that to really sort of drive. But if I think about the middle market and I think about our audience, I think, you know, maybe many of the folks on the webcast today are thinking about how to go from all I've got is an ERP plus Excel. You know, I'd really encourage a couple of tools. Again, Adaptive, Host Analytics. There's some great tools out there that can help you get started.
Nash, I think the challenge is actually bigger and more immediate than the way you framed it, even, which is quite alarming, I think, for many of us. We've seen in the last 3 months, forecasting isn't about a single number. You know, we're really looking at enormous uncertainty, and, you know, how do we understand and present what the different range of scenarios are? And I think in the finance function, you know, you're kind of getting that from both ends. On the one hand, if you ask me as a business owner for what's my forecast to put into your forecast, I can't give you a single number anymore. And then, you know, by the same token, what does the board need to make any decisions? A single number is not going to help them very much either.
I never said single number, by the way.
That's true, you didn't. To be fair, you did not. I agree. But, you know, I think that's just, nevertheless, in many organizations, we've been able to do that in the past, right? And I think that's now something which the levels of uncertainty that we've seen in the last 3 months, I mean, if that's the new normal, if there's already not enough pressure on all of you CFOs to figure out how to get there now, you know, I think this is the moment that, you know, that 5 years is not an option of how long it takes to implement the ability to do that.